My name is Anya Petrova and I am a veteran of the marital wars. 5 times I have stood at the altar and 5 times I have walked away, leaving behind not a trail of tears, but a legacy of thoroughly chastened mothers-in-law. I am not the problem. I am the solution to a particular kind of domestic tyranny. So when my path crossed with Leo Volkov's, a man whose gentle eyes held the shadows of 3 shattered marriages, the warnings from my friends came not as a surprise, but as a familiar chorus. Anya, you cannot be serious, my best friend Sarah had hissed over a glass of Pinot Grigio, her knuckles white around the stem. The Volkov family is a cursed tree. The fruit is rotten. That woman, Helen, she's not a mother-in-law, she's a psychological saboteur. She systematically dismantled her 3 daughter-in-law. The stories were the stuff of local legend, whispered at book clubs and over gym treadmills. The first daughter-in-law, Alara, a delicate artist, had a beautiful Persian cat named Sasha, her companion for 10 lonely years. Noticing Alara was looking thin after the wedding, Helen presented her with a rich, hearty stew, cooing about family recipes and building strength. Alara ate 2 bowls. It was only when she asked for the recipe that Helen smiled, a thin, cruel line, and said, "Oh, it's quite simple, dear. Just 1 whole cat simmered for hours." Sasha was surprisingly tender. Alara was hospitalized for a week. The narrative Helen sold. Alara was so unstable she'd had a psychotic break over a simple pot roast. The second daughter-in-law, Clara, an orphan who lost her father in childhood, found in Helen a seemingly empathetic ear. Helen used that intimacy like a scalpel. She convinced Clara that Leo was ashamed of her lack of family, that every minor mistake was a reflection of her unrefined upbringing. Then, on the anniversary of her father's death, Helen insisted on throwing a loud, joyous party in Clara's honor, forcing her to sing karaoke while her heart was in a grave. Clara's tearful outburst was branded as brutish ingratitude. The third daughter-in-law, Maya, was a gentle soul with a history of childhood bullying that had left deep scars. Helen played the role of the wise, non-judgmental mentor, drawing out Maya's secret. She had been forced to drink toilet water by classmates. Within a month, that humiliating secret was common knowledge among the Volkovs' entire social circle, accidentally revealed by a concerned Helen. Maya's subsequent depression was framed as a threatening, violent instability. "She's a monster, Anya," Sarah finished, draining her glass. "She devours gentle women for breakfast." I leaned back, a slow smile spreading across my face. "But Sarah, darling," I said softly, "I'm not a gentle woman. I am the indigestion that follows the feast." You see, my own history was a testament to that. My 5 former mothers-in-law were not sweet old ladies. They were dictators of their domestic domains. One tried to control my finances, another my wardrobe, a third my career. The one who cooked my pet rabbit, Bunnicula, into a stew learned the meaning of haunting when I reincarnated the creature in her bedroom night after night. I don't start fights, but I have a PhD in finishing them. Leo, with his sad eyes and his monstrous mother, was not a project. He was a calling. The wedding was a quiet affair. Helen, a handsome woman in her late 60s with impeccably coiffed silver hair and a smile that never reached her cold, blue eyes, played the part of the doting mother perfectly. She squeezed my hands and called me the daughter she'd always wanted. I smiled back just as warmly. The chessboard was set. We moved into the Volkov family home, a large, traditional house where Helen ruled with an iron fist wrapped in a velvet glove. Leo's father, Ivan, a quiet, defeated man, seemed to exist as a ghost in his own home. The first morning after the wedding, I came down to the smell of cooking. The scene in the dining room was a masterpiece of staged domesticity. 4 plates of dumplings sat on the table. 3 were haphazard, the pleats clumsy, the shapes irregular. The plate before my seat, on a delicate rose-patterned china dish, was a work of art. Each dumpling was identically perfect, a little crescent moon of culinary excellence. It was a signal as clear as a flare gun. "You are special and I am watching you. Good morning, my dear," Helen trilled, emerging from the kitchen with a flourish. She held up her left hand, displaying 3 fresh red cuts on her fingers. "I wanted your first breakfast as part of the family to be perfect. I was up at 3 a.m., getting these just right for you." Before I could respond, her phone chimed. With a practiced move, she initiated a group video call. Instantly, the screen filled with the faces of 7 elderly women, her sisters and closest friends. Their chatter filled the room. "Oh, Helen, you've outdone yourself," cooed one aunt, her face pixelated with enthusiasm. "Dumplings. And for your new daughter-in-law. Ranitha, isn't she wonderful? You must eat them before they get cold." I felt all eyes on me. The aunts on the screen, Ivan's weary gaze, Leo's hopeful one, and Helen's predatory stare. The perfect dumplings sat there, a beautiful trap. Refusing them would brand me as the ungrateful witch from day one. I picked up my chopsticks, my smile never wavering. I selected one of the perfect dumplings, brought it to my lips, and took a small, cautious bite. The flavor that exploded in my mouth was a violation. It was a horrific alchemy of bitter melon, masquerading as zucchini, and a quantity of ginger so vast it burned like acid. The entire concoction was saturated with enough salt to dehydrate a camel. It was not food, it was a weapon designed to provoke a reaction. Tears sprang to my eyes, genuine tears of physiological shock. Helen's smile widened infinitesimally. She thought she had won. But those tears were my ammunition. I dabbed them delicately with a napkin, discreetly spitting the vile mouthful into it. I looked up, my eyes glistening. "Oh, Mom," I breathed, my voice choked with emotion. "These are the most delicious dumplings I have ever tasted. This is the taste of a mother's love." Helen's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. I saw the confusion in her eyes. This was not in the script. I rose from my seat, the picture of devoted gratitude. "But the head of the family should have the first and the best," I declared, turning to Ivan. "Dad, you must taste this." Before the bewildered man could protest, I used Leo's chopsticks to shovel a whole dumpling into his open mouth. He chewed once, his eyes bulging. He clutched his throat, a gag reflex overtaking him. "Is something wrong, Dad?" I asked, my voice laced with innocent concern. "Don't you think Mom's cooking is wonderful?" Ivan, trapped by the watching faces on the phone, shook his head violently, forced the abomination down, and reached for a glass of water with a trembling hand. "And you, my love," I said, turning to Leo with a doting smile. I fed him the other half of my dumpling. His face contorted into a mask of agony, but he swallowed under the weight of my expectant gaze. Then I turned to Helen. The chess match had truly begun. "And now for you, Mom. The artist must taste her own masterpiece." I knelt beside her, snatching her chopsticks. The relatives on the call were sighing with admiration. "Helen, you are so blessed. Such a filial daughter-in-law." Helen tried to lean back, but I was relentless. "Aunties, my mom has been working so hard, she's gotten so thin. I insist she eats properly." I shoved the first dumpling into her mouth. The look of pure, unadulterated horror on her face as her own concoction hit her taste buds was worth every second of the vile taste still lingering in my mouth. She tried to get up, but I placed a firm hand on her knee, pinning her to the chair. "Look how much she enjoys it." I chirped to the phone. "I'll make this for her every day from now on." I fed her a second, then a third. The relatives were ecstatic. Helen was forced to chew and swallow, her face turning a pale shade of green. By the time the plate was empty and the video call ended, she was bolting for the bathroom, the sound of her retching echoing through the house. Leo and Ivan looked at me, a new, strange respect in their eyes, mixed with fear. I simply smiled, wiping my hands clean. The first battle was over. The war for the soul of this house had just begun, and I, Anya Petrova, was ready for the long campaign. The bitter melon dumplings cast a pall over the Volkov household for days. A tense silence replaced the usual false cheer. Helen moved through the rooms like a ghost, her complexion still slightly sallow, shooting me glances that could curdle milk. Ivan and Leo picked at their food, their appetites seemingly destroyed by the memory of that taste. I, on the other hand, found my appetite surging. There's nothing like a good victory to whet the palate. I ate heartily at every meal, especially enjoying the sight of Helen pushing her food around her plate, her smugness replaced by a wary tension. I knew this wasn't over. A woman like Helen doesn't surrender after one skirmish. She regroups. She plots. Her pride had been wounded, and she would retaliate with something far more insidious than bad food. The question was not if, but when and how. 2 days later the answer came. I had taken a certain professional interest in home security during my previous marriages. Let's just say I believe in being prepared. Tiny, discreet cameras no larger than a button, were nestled in the living room, disguised as part of the decor. An alert pinged on my phone while I was at work. A notification of motion in the master bedroom during a time when no one should have been home. Pulling up the live feed, my blood ran cold, then quickly heated to a simmer of fury. There was Helen, her back to the camera, fiddling with something on the dresser opposite the bed. She adjusted a small black object perched on top of the frame, aiming it directly at the king-sized bed. She was installing a surveillance camera in her own son's bedroom. The audacity was breathtaking, the violation absolute. What was her plan? To catch me in some compromising position? To film private moments between me and Leo and use them as blackmail? To humiliate me by sharing intimate footage? The possibilities were vile, each one designed to shatter my dignity and drive me from her home. A cold, focused calm settled over me. Panic was for amateurs. Anger was a tool to be wielded, not a master to be served. I immediately excused myself from work, citing a migraine. My first stop was not home, but an electronics store where I purchased the highest resolution, widest angle night vision capable camera they had. If Helen wanted a show, I would give her one worthy of an Oscar. Checking the home surveillance again, I confirmed the house was empty. I ushered the technician I'd hired directly to Helen and Ivan's bedroom. I want it installed there, I said, pointing to a high corner that gave a perfect panoramic view of their entire room, most notably their bed. Make it invisible. The technician, a young man who asked no questions, did his job efficiently. As he packed his tools, I felt a sense of grim satisfaction. I had turned her weapon back on her. Whatever she planned to do with her footage, I now held the ultimate counterstrike. With time to kill before anyone returned home, I decided to go for a walk to clear my head. I bought a starchy sausage from a street vendor and was idly people-watching when a familiar figure caught my eye. Ivan. He was emerging from the side entrance of a modest hotel, but he wasn't alone. A woman at least 20 years his junior, with brassy blonde hair and a tight dress, clung to his arm. They were laughing, an intimate, comfortable sound. I pulled my hat down and moved closer, using a newsstand as cover. The bed in that place is too soft, the woman was complaining, rubbing the small of her back. It's making my spine ache. It's not as comfortable as your bed at home. Ivan chuckled, a sound I rarely heard. Next time, my dear Sasha, we'll just go to the house. Helen has her bridge game on Tuesdays. He leaned in and kissed her, a long, lingering kiss that was utterly at odds with the defeated man I knew. They tumbled into a waiting car, oblivious. I stood there, the pieces clicking into place. So Ivan had his own secrets. This juicy scandal was a gift I hadn't anticipated. The plot, as they say, was thickening. In the following days, a strange shift occurred. Helen's initial wariness was replaced by a creeping, unmistakable smugness. Every morning, as Leo and I emerged from our bedroom, she would be there, sipping her tea, her eyes following me with a mixture of malice and triumphant anticipation. He thought she had the upper hand. She thought the camera in our room was her unblinking eye, gathering evidence of my impending downfall. Little did she know I was giving her nothing to see. I was a model of discretion. I changed clothes in the bathroom. My conversations with Leo under the covers were purely conversational. I was staging a play for her camera, and the set was deliberately bland. Meanwhile, I was meticulously preparing the stage for her own downfall. I began subtly altering our bedroom, switching the duvet cover, the pillows, even the artwork to closely resemble the ones in her room. From the camera's limited, high-angle perspective, the two rooms would be nearly indistinguishable. A week later, I came home from work to a scene straight out of my expectations. The living room was a parliament of owls. 5 of Helen's sisters and her closest friend Agnes were perched on the sofas, their wrinkled faces turned towards me in unison. Helen sat among them, the queen bee, barely able to contain her glee. "Anya dear, you're home," she simpered, rushing to take my bag. "No need to cook tonight, we'll order in. You look tired, sweetheart. Why don't you sit with us? We're just about to watch a little television." Her smile was a razor blade. This was it. The grand unveiling. She picked up the remote, her hand trembling with excitement, and turned on the massive flat-screen TV. For a second the screen was blue. Then it erupted into a frenzy of motion. The image was stark, high-definition, and blindingly explicit. 2 figures were entangled on a bed, their backs to the camera, engaged in the most primal of acts. The room gasped in unison. I immediately dropped my head, feigning a shock and shame so profound I couldn't look. Helen was in her element. "Oh my heavens!" she shrieked, a masterpiece of feigned horror. "What is this? Where did this come from? Oh dear, isn't that the remote? The remote isn't working." She fumbled pointlessly with the controller. "Everyone, please don't look. It's natural for a young couple to be passionate. But really, Anya," she'd said, her voice dripping with faux sympathy, "your skin looks a bit dull on camera. And so energetic. Poor Leo having to perform like that. Is he taking something? This isn't healthy, dear." The ants began to cluck their tongues, their voices rising in a chorus of judgment. "Anya, a woman must have modesty," one cried. "So shameless. Helen, you must control this." I kept my head down, my body trembling. But it wasn't with embarrassment. It was with the sheer, almost unbearable effort of suppressing my laughter. Because I knew the woman on that screen wasn't me. And I knew the man wasn't Leo. The timing was perfect. The front door opened. Ivan was home. He stopped dead in the hallway, a bag of groceries in his hand. His eyes went from the congregation of horrified women to the Technicolor scandal playing out on his television. The bag dropped from his grasp. A watermelon smashed on the floor, a burst of red like a punctuation mark to the scene. And at that exact moment the camera angle shifted slightly, and the faces of the two lovers became clearly visible for the first time. It was Ivan and his mistress Sasha. The room fell into a silence so profound you could hear the hum of the refrigerator. The smug smile melted off Helen's face, replaced by a look of pure, uncomprehending horror. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her a ghastly white. I looked up, my eyes wide with feigned innocence. I met Helen's stunned gaze and allowed a small, cold smile to touch my lips. Then I turned to the frozen ants and asked the question that shattered Helen's world into a million pieces. "Mom," I said, my voice soft and deliberately confused. Did you already know about Dad's affair? Is that why you called everyone here today? To confront him?" The dam broke. Ivan's face twisted into a mask of volcanic rage. He wasn't looking at the TV anymore. He was staring at Helen, his eyes promising utter destruction. The ants, finally understanding, switched their allegiance in a heartbeat. They descended on Ivan not with sympathy but with vicious glee. "Ivan Volkov. You dog. At your age. And with that hussy. Look, she's already tired after 5 minutes." Helen stood there, utterly exposed. Her plan to destroy me had spectacularly backfired, exposing her husband's infidelity and her own manipulative nature to her entire social circle. She had aimed a cannon at me and blown up her own life. Ivan stormed across the room, snatched the remote and killed the image. He didn't say a word. He just grabbed Helen by the arm, his grip like iron, and dragged her, stumbling and speechless, towards his study. The door slammed shut and the sound of raised, furious voices seeped through the wood. I politely began ushering the stunned ants toward the door. "Ladies, please, this is a private family matter," I said, my voice the picture of strained diplomacy. "We must keep this quiet. For Dad's sake. And for Mom's dignity." From the gleam in their eyes, I knew the story would be on the front page of the gossip grapevine before sunset. I closed the door, leaning against it, and finally allowed myself to breathe. The second battle was over. And this time I hadn't just won. I had annihilated the enemy's position. The fallout I knew would be nuclear. The silence that fell after the ants scurried away was heavier than any sound. It was a thick, suffocating blanket woven from shame and rage. From behind the study door, I could hear the low, guttural rumble of Ivan's voice, punctuated by the sharp crack of Helen's weeping. It wasn't the gentle cry of a heartbroken woman. It was the furious, frustrated wail of a strategist whose master plan had exploded in her face. Leo stood frozen in the hallway, his face pale as he stared at the closed study door. The smashed watermelon lay on the floor like a crime scene stain. "Anya," he finally whispered, his voice hoarse. What just happened?" I walked over to him, placing a calming hand on his arm. "What happened, my love, is that your mother tried to stage a play where I was the villain. But she forgot to give me the script, so I rewrote the ending." He looked at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and dawning realization. "The camera, in our room, she planted it," I finished for him, my voice soft but firm. I found it last week. I suspected she was up to something, so I took precautionary measures. The footage, that was Dad. Leo's voice was flat with disbelief. All this time, Mom knew? She set this up to what? Humiliate him? To humiliate you. To regain control, I said, leading him away from the mess and into the kitchen. By making me the target, she could play the victim, the concerned mother dealing with a shameless daughter-in-law. She never imagined the footage wouldn't be of us. I made him a strong cup of tea, my mind already racing ahead. The public exposure of Ivan's affair was a wound, but the revelation of Helen's manipulation was a fatal blow to her carefully constructed image. The ants, those professional gossips, were my unwitting messengers. The story would spread through their network like a virus, mutating and growing with each retelling. Helen wouldn't just be the pitiful wife of a cheating husband. She would be the scheming witch who tried to use his infidelity as a weapon. The study door flew open. Ivan emerged, his face a thundercloud. He didn't look at us. He strode to the front door, grabbed his car keys and left without a word. The slam of the door echoed through the house. A moment later, Helen appeared in the doorway. Her impeccable silver hair was disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed and blazing with a hatred so pure it was almost impressive. She focused that hatred entirely on me. You, she spat, the word a venomous dart. You did this. I met her gaze calmly. I did what, Mom? I was the one who came home to find my private life being broadcast as dinner theater. I was the one who was publicly shamed for crimes I didn't commit. All I did was ask a question. You knew, she shrieked, taking a step toward me. You knew about the camera. You switched the footage. Leo stepped between us, his own anger finally surfacing. Mother, that's enough. How dare you? Putting a camera in our bedroom? What were you thinking? And then to try and blame Anya for your monstrosity. Helen looked at her son as if he'd struck her. The betrayal in her eyes was real this time. Leo, how can you speak to me like that? After all I've done for you. I was trying to protect you. That woman, she jabbed a finger at me, is poisoning you against me. The only poison in this house is coming from you. Leo shot back, his voice shaking. You drove away Alara and Clara and Maya. I always made excuses for you. I thought they were weak, that they didn't understand you. But I see it now. You can't stand anyone taking an ounce of attention away from you. You're sick. The word hung in the air. Sick. It was the truth, but hearing it from her son broke something in her. Her shoulders slumped, and the furious energy drained out of her, replaced by a terrifying stillness. She looked from Leo's furious face to my calm one, and a new, colder resolve settled in her eyes. You'll see, she whispered, her voice icy. You'll both see. She turned and walked slowly up the stairs, a queen descending from her ruined throne. The next few days were a study in tense silence. Ivan didn't come home. Helen became a ghost, moving through the house without speaking, her presence a cold spot in every room. But her eyes were always watching me, calculating. The smugness was gone, replaced by a deep, simmering fury. She was cornered, and a cornered animal is the most dangerous kind. I knew she was planning her next move. She had to. Her power was built on her reputation as the long-suffering matriarch. Now she was the laughingstock, the manipulator. I had to be ready. I spent a small fortune on high-powered, portable speakers, the kind used by square dancing troupes in the park. I distributed them to the group of formidable elderly women who congregated every evening in the courtyard of our complex, framing it as a donation to their community. They were delighted. I was building my own army, an echo chamber waiting for my signal. The final straw for Helen seemed to be a phone call Ivan received the next morning. I was in the kitchen, but through the open door, I heard his voice, initially placating, then rising in anger. What did you say? Who told you that? Agnes? That busybody. It's none of your damn business. My private life is not a topic for your bridge club. He slammed the phone down. A moment later, he stormed into the living room where Helen was pretending to read a magazine. You, he roared, and I discreetly pulled out my phone to watch the living room surveillance feed. You and your big mouth. The whole city knows. My business partners are calling me. They're calling me a laughingstock. All because you couldn't keep your scheming to yourself. I didn't tell them anything. Helen cried, her voice shrill. You didn't have to. You orchestrated that whole circus. You think I don't know why you did it? You couldn't stand that those 3 wives saw through you, so you had to destroy them. And now you can't stand that Anya sees through you too. Well, I've had it. I can't stand your poison anymore. I saw his arm rise on the screen, and then the sound of a sharp slap echoed through the house. The feed wobbled as the camera was jostled. Helen let out a cry. I heard her collapse onto the sofa, sobbing. If you dare meddle in my life again, Ivan snarled, I'll divorce you. Mean it, Kira. I'll throw you out of this house. He stormed out, leaving Helen weeping on the sofa. When I was sure he was gone, I walked into the living room. She was sitting there, her face buried in her hands, her body shaking with ragged sobs. But as I approached, she looked up. The tears were real, but the hatred in her eyes was undimmed. She glared at me, her face blotchy and swollen. You think you've won? She whispered, her voice raw. You haven't. I'll make him divorce you. I'll ruin you so completely no man will ever look at you again. I didn't respond. I just looked at her, this broken, vicious woman, and I knew the war was far from over. She had nothing left to lose. And that made her more unpredictable than ever. A few days later, Leo left for a short business trip. The house was empty except for Helen and me. The silence was a living thing, thick with anticipation. I was lounging on the sofa, scrolling through my phone, feigning nonchalance. I knew this was her moment. Without Leo as a buffer, she would make her move. Sure enough, I heard her footsteps on the stairs. She walked into the living room, her face a mask of cold determination. Without a word, she strode over to me, snatched the phone from my hands and turned it off. We need to talk, she said, her voice low and dangerous. I didn't resist. I simply looked up at her, my face a blank page. Who said only phones could record audio? The speakers in the courtyard were waiting. I had activated the remote microphone on my way downstairs. She stood over me, looming, trying to intimidate. You've humiliated me twice now. You must be so proud of yourself. She let out a harsh, dry laugh. Do you really think just because you have a marriage certificate you and Leo can last? I made him divorce 3 times. I can make it a 4th. By the time I'm done, your reputation will be in the gutter. You'll be unmarriageable trash just like the others. I lowered my head, not to hide fear but to conceal the cold smile on my face. Her voice, clear as a bell, was now being broadcast to the entire courtyard, to the entire neighborhood. The echo chamber was live. I looked up, faking a tremble in my voice. Mom, what are you talking about? You're joking, right? She took the bait, her arrogance overriding her caution. She launched into a proud, vile confession, detailing how she had psychologically tortured her previous daughters-in-law. The dog stew, the death anniversary party, the public betrayal of Maya's deepest shame. She spat out the stories like trophies, each one more horrifying than the last. Those 3 were filial. It was my doing that they ended up like that, she crowed, her voice echoing slightly in the room and magnified 100-fold outside. I listened, my blood running cold with a fresh wave of anger for those women, even as I marveled at her stupidity. She was so consumed by her need to dominate me that she didn't notice the world was listening. Finally, she shoved her face close to mine. You've screwed me over twice. I'll make sure you die. The word die hung in the air and then it echoed. Die, he die, he die. Helen froze. Her head cocked. For the first time she heard it. The faint but unmistakable echo of her own voice, carrying from the open windows of the apartments across the courtyard. The color drained from her face. I looked toward the balcony. Mom, I said softly, my voice also carrying. Everyone in the neighborhood just heard everything you said. Her eyes widened in dawning, absolute horror. She stumbled back from me, her bravado shattered. She was exposed. Not just to me but to the world. And in that moment, I saw the birth of a truly desperate, catastrophic idea in her panicked eyes. She was going to go for the classic final move of the cornered manipulator. She turned and ran for the balcony. The final act was about to begin. Helen's flight to the balcony wasn't a retreat. It was a strategic repositioning. She was moving the battle to a more public stage, banking on the oldest trick in the toxic mother-in-law playbook, the fake suicide. She threw one leg over the railing, a dramatic gesture meant for the audience she now knew was watching. The courtyard below had fallen silent. I could feel dozens of eyes trained on our balcony. She turned back to me, her face a grotesque mask of feigned despair. If my death is the only way you'll treat my son right, Anya, she wailed, her voice projecting with practiced hysteria, then I'll just die. I can't live like this anymore. I played my part perfectly. I rushed to the balcony door, my hands flying to my mouth. Mom. No. Please get down. Please. I cried, making sure my voice carried the perfect blend of panic and desperation. I needed to look like the terrified daughter-in-law, not the orchestrator of this entire scene. I approached her slowly, my hands outstretched in a placating gesture. Mom, please come inside. We can talk about this. I'll listen to whatever you say. This was the cue. Down in the courtyard, Granny Ludmila, the formidable leader of the square dancing troupe, lifted the megaphone I had provided. Her voice, crackling with age and amplified to deafening levels, boomed across the complex. Helen Volkov, didn't you want to falsely accuse your daughter-in-law? Then jump. If you really dare to jump today, then everyone will know what a wicked woman you are for driving her to it. Another voice, Agnes's sister perhaps, grabbed the megaphone. We all heard you, Helen. We heard everything. How you tortured those poor girls. The reporters are here, you know. They'll tell the whole city what you are. Helen, who had been pretending to struggle with her balance, froze. Her eyes darted downward. Sure enough, mixed in with the crowd of elderly residents were a few younger people with professional cameras. The local news crew, tipped off by an anonymous neighbor, had arrived just in time for the climax. The look on her face was priceless. It was the utter collapse of a scheme. Her performance had been hijacked. She wasn't the tragic heroine anymore. She was the villain being exposed in real time. The smugness, the fury, the calculation, all of it vanished, replaced by sheer, unadulterated terror. The reality of her situation crashed down on her. She was a laughingstock, recorded and now publicly denounced. A strangled gasp escaped her lips. Her legs, which had been firmly planted on the balcony floor, buckled. She didn't jump. She crumpled, sliding down the railing into a heap on the balcony tiles, a pathetic, sobbing mess. The fight had gone out of her completely. I rushed to her side, now playing the role of the concerned family member. Someone help. My mother-in-law has collapsed. Call an ambulance. The performance was over. The curtains had fallen on Helen Volkov. The ambulance arrived and Helen was stretchered away, suffering from what the paramedics diagnosed as extreme emotional distress and a dangerous spike in blood pressure. I rode in the ambulance with her, holding her limp hand, the picture of devotion for the cameras that followed us to the hospital. At the hospital, after she was stabilized and moved to a private room, the real drama began. She regained consciousness to find Leo sitting by her bedside, his face grim. I stood quietly in the corner, a silent observer. Helen's eyes fluttered open. She saw Leo and immediately slipped back into her role. Her voice was a weak, pathetic whisper. Leo, my son. Anya, she spoke to me so harshly. But it's okay. Mom's fine. Don't you dare blame her when you go home. It's my fault. I'm just a burden. It was a masterful last-ditch effort to drive a wedge between us, to play the martyr until the very end. But the spell was broken. Leo's expression didn't soften. Instead it hardened. He angrily shook off her hand. Mother, stop. Just stop, he said, his voice low and shaking with disgust. I heard it all. I came home early. I heard what you said to Anya. I heard you confess to everything. You disgust me. Helen's jaw dropped. The monitor behind her began to beep frantically as her blood pressure skyrocketed. I remained in my corner, leaning against the wall, saying nothing. My work here was done. The truth, spoken from the mouth of her beloved son, was a more potent weapon than any I could have wielded. In my heart, Anya is the most important person, Leo continued, his voice firming with resolve. From now on I will protect her. If you can't accept that, then perhaps you need to live somewhere else. A nursing home. Because no one at home will welcome you after this. The words, nursing home, were a death knell to a woman like Helen. Her social life was her oxygen. To be institutionalized, cut off from the world she sought to control, was a fate worse than death. She let out a moan and turned her face to the wall. The door to the room opened. It was Ivan. He walked in, his face like stone, and stood at the foot of the bed. Helen, he said, his voice cold. The whole neighborhood knows. My reputation is ruined. People see me on the street and laugh. They say if I could be married to you, I must be a monster too. He held up his phone, showing her a picture. It was of their front door. 3 large, red banners were hung across it. These were delivered this morning. From the families of Alara, Clara, and Maya. They thanked you. Helen stared at the screen, her eyes wide with horror. Ivan zoomed in on the text of one banner. It says, "Thank you, Helen Volkov, for showing your true colors. You have cleared our daughter's name. You are their great benefactor. They said they'll send you wedding invitations when they remarry." Ivan's voice trembled with rage. "Read it, Helen. Your retribution is here. This is your punishment." At that moment, I picked up the remote control for the room's television and turned it on. I switched to the local news channel. The lead story was just beginning. A shocking scene in a local residential complex today. The anchor's voice filled the quiet room. Where an elderly woman's attempt to fake suicide backfired spectacularly, exposing a years-long campaign of psychological abuse against her daughters-in-law. The screen showed footage from the courtyard, clearly capturing Helen's dramatic performance on the balcony. The report used the audio from the loudspeakers, her own voice confessing to her crimes for the entire city to hear. The report was brutal, factual, and utterly damning. On the screen, Helen was pretending to climb the railing, her feet safely grounded, a smug, triumphant smirk on her face that was now frozen in infamy for all to see. Back in the hospital room, the real Helen let out a choked sob. Tears of shame and defeat streamed down her face. The fierceness in her eyes when she looked at me was gone, replaced by a hollow, broken emptiness. She had been utterly and publicly destroyed. She spent the next few days in the hospital in absolute silence. She didn't speak to anyone, just stared at the wall. When the day came for her discharge, Leo went to handle the paperwork. I stayed in the room with her. As soon as we were alone, she turned to me. The defeat in her eyes was gone, replaced by a last desperate flicker of her old cunning. "Anya," she said, her voice a dry rasp. "I won't let Leo divorce you. I accept you as my daughter-in-law." She tried to smile, but it was a ghastly, twisted expression. "But now that I'm your mother-in-law and I'm sick, you have to take care of me. You'll quit your job. You will be by my side, serving me for the rest of your life." She was trying to reclaim power through the one avenue she had left, the archaic rules of filial duty. "I am your elder. You must be filial. When we get back, I'll live stream you taking care of me. If you do a bad job, I'll have the whole internet bully you." I looked at her, this pathetic woman still trying to play a game she had already lost. My expression didn't change. "Whatever you say, Mom," I replied obediently. A strange look crossed her face, confusion, then a stubborn resolve. "I'm one generation above you. The word filial alone can keep you under my foot forever." "That's absolutely true," I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. "Being one generation older is truly remarkable. That's why I've also brought your mother-in-law back home. She should be waiting for us now." Helen's face went blank with disbelief. "What? Let the grandmother," I said softly, "put an end to all this." The color drained from Helen's face completely. The final piece of my checkmate was in place. I had brought in the one person who could outrank her, the one person who knew all her tricks. The war was about to end, not with a bang, but with a whimper from a woman who finally understood she had been outplayed at every single turn. The car ride home from the hospital was a silent, glacial journey. Helen sat stiffly in the backseat beside me, her face a pale mask of apprehension. She kept shooting me sidelong glances, trying to decipher my final statement. Bringing her mother-in-law, Leo's grandmother, into this? It was a move she had not anticipated. The grandmother, Valentina, was a force of nature Helen had spent decades carefully managing from a distance. Leo, sensing the electric tension, kept his eyes fixed on the road. He had handed me a folder before we left the hospital. "It's everything," he'd murmured. "Bank books, investment portfolios, the deeds to the house and the summer cottage. I want you to have control, Anya. I never want you to feel powerless in your own home again." I had accepted it without a word. It wasn't about the money, it was about the statement. In this new world order, I was the one holding the keys. As we pulled into the driveway, I saw a familiar, formidable silhouette through the frosted glass of the front door. My heart gave a little leap of anticipation. The stage was set. Helen saw her too. A tremor ran through her body. She fumbled with her seatbelt, her earlier bravado completely evaporated. She was no longer the predator. She was prey returning to a den now occupied by a larger, older predator. I exited the car first, a serene smile on my face. Leo helped his mother out, her steps hesitant. As I crouched down to untie my boots in the entryway, the front door swung open. There stood Valentina Volkov. At 85, she was a tall, ramrod-straight woman with a crown of thick white hair and eyes that missed nothing. She had outlived 2 husbands and managed a successful business until she was 75. She had no patience for weakness, especially not from her daughter-in-law, whom she had never particularly liked. Helen, seeking to establish some semblance of control, seized the moment. She shoved her foot, still in its sensible hospital-issue slipper, toward me. Her voice was a reedy attempt at authority. "Anya, kneel down right now and change my slippers for me." It was a pathetic power play, a desperate grasp for the old hierarchy. She never saw the blow coming. A whirlwind of fury in a floral print dress, Valentina rushed forward. The sound of the slap was like a gunshot in the quiet hallway. It snapped Helen's head to the side. "You vile woman!" Valentina roared, her voice echoing with the power of a woman who had commanded boardrooms. "Who gave you the nerve to bully my granddaughter-in-law?" Another slap landed on Helen's other cheek. "With me gone, you think you can be queen? You think you can trap my son? I'll slap the stupid right out of your head. I'll remind you who is really in charge of this family." I stood up slowly. Helen's face was already swelling, 2 bright red handprints blooming on her pale skin. She looked utterly ridiculous, a chastised child caught stealing candy. She staggered back, her hands flying to her stinging cheeks, and in a moment of pure panic she fumbled in her pocket and pulled out her hospital discharge papers, waving them like a white flag. "Mama, I'm sick. You can't hit me. The doctor said I need rest." Valentina pursed her lips, her eyes rolling so dramatically I thought they might get stuck. She reached into the large carpet bag at her feet and pulled out a thick stack of medical folders, slapping them down on the hall table. "Stop your dramatic nonsense. If you weren't well, would they have let you out?" "Sick? I'm sick." She thumped her chest. "Arthritis. High blood pressure. A touch of angina. 5 different conditions. As my daughter-in-law, you are obligated to take good care of me." She leaned in, her face inches from Helen's. "I've moved in starting today. All the household chores are yours. And you will also take good care of Anya." She turned to me, her expression softening imperceptibly. "Anya is preparing for pregnancy. She needs to be strong to give me a great-grandson to hold before my 80th birthday. You will make her life easy. Is that understood?" Helen's face contorted, a silent scream of injustice. She was being demoted from matriarch to a combination of maid and nursemaid. She opened her mouth to protest. Smack. Valentina didn't tolerate dissent. "Helen Volkov, if you dare to cause any more trouble, I will tell Ivan to divorce you. And then I will follow your example. I will go out and ruin your reputation so thoroughly that no old man would ever want you. You'll be digging through trash for food. Do you understand me?" The threat was delivered with such cold, unwavering certainty that Helen visibly shrank. She understood that Valentina, unlike her, never made threats she wasn't prepared to carry out. I walked past them and settled onto the living room sofa, the plush cushions a throne after the battlefield of the hallway. I splayed a hand over my flat stomach. "Mom," I called out, my voice sweet. "I'm thirsty. I'd like some water. At exactly 45 degrees Celsius, please. Too cold or too hot isn't good for the baby." Helen stood rooted to the spot, trembling with humiliation. Valentina gave her a shove that sent her stumbling toward the kitchen. "What are you waiting for? Move. Or do you need another reminder?" Just then the front door opened again. Ivan walked in, and he wasn't alone. On his arm was Sasha, the mistress, her brassy blonde hair gleaming in the hallway light. She looked smug and possessive. "Mama," Ivan said, his voice unnaturally bright. "I heard you were back. I brought Sasha to see you. She's been so worried." He glanced at Helen with pure contempt. Sasha is kindness itself. Not like some two-faced people who smile to your face and stab you in the back. It was the final straw. The humiliation, the slaps, the utter inversion of her world, the sight of her husband and his mistress flaunting their relationship in her own home. It was too much. Something in Helen's mind snapped. A guttural, inhuman sound ripped from her throat. "I can't stand you anymore," she screamed, her voice cracking. She began pulling at her own hair, her eyes wild. "I want a divorce. I want to remarry. I'm done. I'm done serving all of you." She lunged across the hallway, not at me but at Sasha, her fingers curled into claws. "I'll kill you first, you filthy whore." Ivan moved to protect Sasha, and Helen's flailing arms caught him across the face, leaving long red scratches. "Ivan! How dare you? You cheated. You're no better than I am. If I'm suffering, no one gets to be happy. Just die." The scene descended into pure chaos. Ivan and Helen were a tangle of slapping arms and screamed insults. Sasha shrieked and tried to pull Ivan away. Valentina, howling in outrage at the attack on her son, launched herself into the fray, her bony fists pummeling Helen's back. It was a pathetic, undignified brawl of scratching, slapping, and screaming. The four of them, the cheating husband, the vengeful wife, the mistress, and the furious grandmother, ended up in a heap on the hallway floor, a whirlwind of floral prints and flying limbs. Leo came and sat beside me on the sofa. He wordlessly handed me a bag of plum-flavored sunflower seeds. We sat there side by side watching the spectacle unfold. It was more riveting than any television drama. The sounds of slaps, curses, and grunts filled the air. I was happily munching on seeds when Leo gently took my hand. He placed a small velvet box in my palm. I opened it. Inside wasn't a ring but a single old-fashioned key. "It's for the cottage by the lake," he said softly. "It's quiet there. Peaceful. I've already put the deed in your name. This house, there are too many ghosts here. We can start fresh. Just us." I looked from the key to the chaotic scene on the floor, then back to Leo's earnest, tired face. I closed my fingers around the key. It felt solid. It felt like a future. I put down the sunflower seeds. The battle for this house was over. The war for my peace had been won. It was time to leave the vipers to their pit. The fallout from the hallway brawl was immediate and decisive. Ivan moved out that very evening, taking Sasha with him to a hotel. The next morning, he and Helen went to the civil registry office and filed for divorce. The paperwork was expedited. Ivan, humiliated and exhausted, wanted nothing more than to sever all ties. He grumbled the entire way, but the resolve on his face was absolute. Helen signed the papers with a hand that trembled not with sadness, but with a kind of frantic, trapped energy. She had gotten what she claimed to want, but the victory was ashes in her mouth. Leo and I did not wait for the dust to settle. We began packing that same afternoon. We weren't just moving houses, we were shedding a skin, leaving behind a place saturated with poison and bad memories. The large, traditional home that had once been Helen's kingdom now felt hollow and haunted. The walls seemed to whisper with past arguments and manipulations. Valentina, true to her word, had moved in. She established herself in the master bedroom with the air of a general taking command of a captured fort. She treated Helen not with cruelty, but with a firm, unyielding expectation of servitude. Helen was now the cook, the cleaner, the errand runner. The socialite who had once ruled the bridge club was now tasked with ensuring the starch in Valentina's blouses was just right. It was a profound, humbling reversal, and Helen endured it with a sullen, silent resentment. She had no fight left. Her spirit had been broken not by a grand confrontation, but by the daily, grinding reality of her new position. Our new home was the lake cottage Leo had given me. It was nothing like the Volkov mansion. It was a modern, open-plan structure of wood and glass, nestled in a quiet grove of pine trees with a stunning view of the water. The air smelled of pine needles and clean water, not of tension and perfume. The first night we spent there, the silence was so profound it was almost a sound in itself. It was a peaceful silence, a healing one. We fell into a new rhythm, Leo and I. He continued his work, but he came home with a lightness I had never seen in him before. The perpetual shadow of anxiety that had clung to him was gone. We cooked simple meals together in the bright kitchen, we took long walks along the lake shore as the sun set, and we talked for hours about everything and nothing. It was during one of these walks, a week after we'd moved, that he finally opened up about the past. "You know," he began, his hand warm in mine, "I always knew on some level that my mother was difficult. But she had a way of twisting things. After Alara left, she cried for days, telling me how Alara had threatened her, how unstable she was. She made me feel like I had to protect her. It was the same with Claire and Maya. She was always the victim. I squeezed his hand, letting him talk. That day in the hospital, when I heard her confession, it was like a scales falling from my eyes. I wasn't protecting her, I was enabling her. I let her destroy those women's lives because it was easier than facing the truth about my own mother. He stopped walking and turned to me, his eyes earnest. I am so sorry, Anya. Sorry for what she put you through. And sorry that it took me so long to see. You see now, I said softly. That's what matters. The cottage became our sanctuary. I started working remotely, my focus sharpened by the tranquility of my surroundings. I took up gardening, planting herbs and flowers in boxes on the deck. I felt a sense of calm and control I hadn't known was possible. The battles with Helen felt like a lifetime ago, a bad dream fading in the morning light. But a part of me remained vigilant. I knew that a creature like Helen, even a broken one, could still lash out. A few weeks after our move, I received a parcel. It was addressed to me in a spidery, familiar handwriting. Inside, without a note, was a small, framed photograph. It was a picture of Leo's third wife, Maya, taken on her wedding day. She was smiling, but her eyes held a deep sadness. It was a bizarre, unsettling message. Was it a threat? A reminder? A plea for solidarity? I showed it to Leo. His face darkened. This is her, he said grimly. She's letting you know she hasn't forgotten. That she's still watching. Instead of feeling afraid, I felt a surge of cold determination. Helen was trying to poison my new life from a distance. She was reminding me that the past was not fully buried. So, I decided to bury it myself. I didn't throw the photograph away. Instead, I placed it on a shelf in my study, next to a beautiful seashell I had found by the lake. I would not hide from the ghosts of the past. I would acknowledge them and then build my future in spite of them. Helen's attempt to unsettle me had failed. It only solidified my resolve to protect the peace Leo and I had found. One evening, as we sat on the deck watching the stars reflect on the still surface of the lake, Leo turned to me. I never want to go back to that life, Anya. The manipulation, the lies. This, he gestured to the quiet darkness around us, this is real. You are real. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, dark blue box. My breath caught. It wasn't the velvet box from before. This was different. Anya, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Our marriage started in the middle of a war. I want to give us a new beginning. A real one. He opened the box. Inside was a simple, elegant band of platinum, set with a single perfect diamond that caught the starlight. Will you marry me? He asked. Again. Properly. Just you and me and maybe a judge by this lake. Tears welled in my eyes, but they were tears of joy, of release. This wasn't a proposal born of obligation or circumstance. It was a choice. A reaffirmation. Yes, I whispered, my voice cracking. Yes, Leo. 1,000 times yes. As he slipped the ring onto my finger, a sense of profound rightness settled over me. We were not just building a new house. We were building a new foundation, one made of trust, peace, and the hard-won wisdom of survival. The past with Helen would always be a part of our story, but it would no longer be the author. We were writing the next chapter ourselves, and it began with a quiet yes under a sky full of stars. The peace of the lake cottage was a living, breathing thing. We nurtured it, and in return, it wrapped around us like a protective blanket. Leo's proposal had cemented this new reality. We were no longer just hiding from the past, we were actively building a future. We started planning a tiny, private ceremony for the following month. Just us, a local judge, and the lake as our witness. The dark blue box sat on my dresser, the diamond catching the morning light, a daily reminder of our pact. But a snake, even when its fangs are drawn, can still startle you with its sudden appearance in the grass. It happened on a Tuesday. Leo was at a meeting in the city and I was working from home, my laptop open to the serene view of the water. The doorbell rang, a soft chime that was usually just a delivery person leaving a package on the porch. I wasn't expecting anyone. I peered through the peephole. My blood went cold. It was Clara, Leo's second wife. She looked different. The pictures I'd seen showed a fragile, nervous woman. The woman on my porch had a sharpness to her, a weary resilience in her eyes. Her hair was shorter, practical. She held herself with a tense readiness like someone braced for a fight. My first instinct was to not answer. This was a ghost from the past and I had no desire to invite her in. But curiosity and a strange sense of obligation won out. I opened the door a crack. "Can I help you?" "You're Anya," she said. It wasn't a question. Her voice was low, raspy from cigarettes. "I'm Clara. I need to talk to you." "I think you have the wrong house," I said, starting to close the door. "It's about Helen," she said quickly, and I froze. "And the others? Alara and Maya. We know what you did. We heard the recording. The whole city heard it." I hesitated. This was a complication I didn't need. But I saw no malice in her eyes, only a desperate urgency. Against my better judgment, I opened the door wider and let her in. She walked into the living room, her eyes scanning the space, taking in the light, the peace, the obvious evidence of a happy life. A flicker of pain crossed her face. This was what she had been denied. "Why are you here, Clara?" I asked, not offering her a seat. She turned to face me, clutching her purse like a shield. "She's not done. Helen. You think you broke her, but you didn't. You just made her more desperate. She's living with Valentina now," I said flatly. "She's a servant in her own house. What can she possibly do?" "You don't understand her," Clara insisted, her voice rising. "Her power was never just in the house. It's in the stories she tells. The narrative she spins. Right now the story is that you are a master manipulator who turned her son against her and drove her to a nervous breakdown. She's been on the phone for weeks, crying to anyone who will listen. She's rewriting history again." A cold knot tightened in my stomach. I had been so focused on my own peace that I'd assumed the battle was over. But Helen's battlefield was the court of public opinion, and she was a seasoned litigator. "What does that have to do with me?" I asked, though I already knew. "She's linking you to us," Clara said, her eyes pleading. "She's saying you sought us out. That you're gathering us. Forming some kind of vengeful ex-wives club. She's telling people you're dangerous. Unstable." The sheer audacity of it took my breath away. Even in defeat, she was trying to paint me as the villain. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because we don't want any part of it." Clara's composure broke. "We finally moved on, Anya. Alara is finally dating again. Maya is doing better with her therapy. We have a chance at normal lives, and the last thing we need is to be dragged back into Helen Volkov's drama." "Your drama." Her words stung, but they were fair. My war with Helen had unintended casualties. "What do you want me to do?" I asked quietly. "Make it stop," she said simply. "You started this. You exposed her. You have to finish it. Make her stop talking. Make her disappear." After Clara left, the peace of the cottage felt fragile, thin. Her visit was a crack in my perfect new world. Leo noticed my preoccupation that evening. "What's wrong?" he asked, his hand on my shoulder. I told him about Clara's visit, about Helen's new campaign of whispers. His face darkened. "I'll talk to her," he said, his voice tight. "And say what, Leo?" I countered. "You know she won't listen. It will just give her more ammunition. My son calls me under that woman's thumb to silence me." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "So what do we do?" "Ignore it." I looked out at the dark lake. Ignoring a snake rarely makes it go away. It just lets it get closer before it strikes. Claire was right. I had to finish this. But I couldn't do it with hammers and screams anymore. That was Helen's language. I had to be smarter. I had to use silence as my weapon. The next day I made a phone call to a private investigator I had used during my second divorce. A discreet, efficient man named Dmitri. I gave him a simple task. Dig up everything he could find on Helen Volkov's life before she married Ivan. Her family, her youth, her first job. Every skeleton, every secret. While Dmitri worked his magic, I enacted phase 2. I knew Helen's greatest fear was irrelevance. So I would make her irrelevant. Leo and I decided to accelerate our plans. We arranged for a small, beautiful article about our upcoming lakeside vow renewal to be placed in the society section of the local paper. The same section that once chronicled Helen's charity galas. The headline would read, "A New Beginning. Leaving the Past Behind." It was a deliberate, peaceful counter-narrative. A week later Dmitri called. He had hit the jackpot. It turned out the impeccable Helen Volkov, née Belova, came from a family teetering on the brink of poverty. Her father had been a gambler who died deeply in debt. To save the family, a young Helen had worked not as a secretary as she claimed, but as a bookkeeper for a man with known ties to the city's underworld. There were rumors never proven of creative accounting, and of a sudden mysterious fire that destroyed the business's records, and conveniently its debts, just before she met Ivan. It wasn't a crime. But it was a story of struggle and ruthlessness that completely contradicted the image of the born and bred elegant socialite she had cultivated for decades. It was the truth, and for a woman like Helen the truth was a poison. I didn't threaten her. I didn't call her. Instead, I had Dmitri anonymously mail her a single grainy photocopy of an old payroll ledger with her name on it, from a business called Korloff & Sons Import-Export. There was no note. Just the evidence of a past she had worked very hard to bury. The silence that followed was more powerful than any explosion. The phone calls to her friends stopped. The whispers ceased. She understood the message. I know your foundation is made of sand. Be quiet or I will remind everyone. A few days later, a formal cream-colored envelope arrived at the cottage. It was addressed to both of us. Inside was a card. The handwriting was shaky but unmistakable. Leo, Anya. I heard of your upcoming ceremony. I wish you every happiness. I am entering a long-term retreat at a spiritual center abroad to focus on my health. Please do not try to contact me. Helen. It was a surrender. A graceful, face-saving exit, but a surrender nonetheless. She was removing herself from the board. She had chosen exile over exposure. I showed the card to Leo. He read it, his expression unreadable. Then he folded it carefully and dropped it into the recycling bin. Good, he said, and that single word held a universe of finality. The ghost had been laid to rest. The crack in our world was sealed stronger than before. The past was finally, truly in the past. Our vow renewal was everything we wanted it to be. There was no white dress, no tuxedo, no crowd. I wore a simple, elegant linen shift the color of the summer sky. Leo wore a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. We stood on the end of the old wooden dock, the judge before us, the lake stretching out to the horizon. The only sounds were the gentle lap of water against the pylons and the judge's calm, clear voice. Do you, Leo, reaffirm your love for this woman, and promise to be her faithful partner in sickness and in health? As Leo spoke his vows, his eyes never leaving mine, I felt not just love, but a profound sense of partnership. We had walked through fire together and emerged, not unscathed but tempered. Stronger. And do you, Anya? I do, I said, and the words felt more meaningful than any I had uttered at my 5 previous weddings. This was a choice made with clear eyes and a full heart. He slipped the new platinum band onto my finger next to the engagement diamond. It was a perfect fit. When the judge pronounced us once again husband and wife, Leo's kiss was sweet and lingering, a promise of the peaceful, uncomplicated life that lay ahead. We celebrated with a picnic of crusty bread, local cheese, and a bottle of chilled champagne right there on the dock. We talked and laughed, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the conversation was about the future. About maybe adding a boat to the dock, about planting a proper vegetable garden in the spring, about the possibility, one day, of the pitter-patter of tiny feet echoing through the cottage. The article in the paper came out the next day. We looked happy and relaxed in the photograph, the lake gleaming behind us. There was no mention of Helen, of past dramas, of anything but a couple looking forward. It was our story told our way. A month later, a postcard arrived. It had a foreign stamp and a picture of a stark, beautiful mountain range. There was no return address. On the back, in that same shaky script, were just 2 words. Thank you. I stared at it for a long time. Was it sarcasm? A final, bitter jab? Or was it, perhaps, a genuine sentiment from a woman who had finally been forced to let go of the poison that had defined her life? I would never know. I showed it to Leo. He glanced at it, nodded once, and then tossed it into the wood stove. We watched it curl and blacken, turning to ash. That small act felt like the true end of the story. We were not just moving on, we were actively letting go. Life at the cottage settled into a deep, satisfying rhythm. The seasons changed. The fiery reds and golds of autumn gave way to the stark, silent beauty of winter. We spent Christmas there, just the 2 of us, a tree twinkling in the corner, the smell of pine and roasting chestnuts filling the air. It was the happiest, quietest holiday I had ever known. One evening in early spring, I was working in my study when an email notification popped up. The subject line made my breath catch. Wedding invitation. It was from Maya, Leo's third wife. With a trembling hand I opened it. It was a digital invitation, tasteful and simple. She was getting married to a kind-faced man who taught art therapy. The ceremony was to be in a small gallery. At the bottom she had written a personal note. Dear Anya, I know this might be strange, but I wanted you to know. Seeing you stand up to her gave me the courage to believe I could have this. In a strange way I feel I owe my happiness to you. I would be honored if you and Leo would come. No pressure. Just know that you have an ally in me always. With gratitude, Maya. Tears welled in my eyes. They were not tears of sadness or anger, but of a quiet, profound victory. My war with Helen had left scars, but it had also, apparently, sown seeds of healing in places I never knew I'd touched. I showed the email to Leo. He read it, a slow smile spreading across his face. What do you think? He asked. I thought about it. I thought about the past, the pain, and the complicated web we had all been trapped in. I think, I said, leaning into his embrace, that we should send a very beautiful gift and our warmest wishes. But some bridges are best left uncrossed. Our peace is here. He held me tighter, kissing the top of my head. Our peace is here, he agreed. And it was. The lake was calm outside our window. The future was ours to write on our own terms. I had entered the pit of vipers not as a victim, but as a different kind of predator altogether. And I had emerged not just with my life, but with a love that was real, a home that was safe, and a hard-won quiet that was more valuable than any victory shout. The game was over. And we had won the only prize that truly mattered. A tomorrow together filled with nothing more dramatic than the simple, beautiful quiet of a life lived in peace. The end.